Hello everyone, welcome to KU Radio Science powered by Khalifa University. My name is Karen and I'm going to be your host for today's episode. If you're new to our channel, please make sure to give us a thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe so you never miss out on another episode. As you know, this month of February is UAE Innovation Month, where we are highlighting groundbreaking achievements and innovators and their success stories and ideas. I'm really excited to have Dr. Andreas Henschel here on the show. How are you, Dr. Andreas?
I'm fine, thanks. How are yourself?
I'm good. Thank you for being here. So Dr. Andreas is from our Department of Computer Science, and he has a very interesting topic. He is a groundbreaker. He is making waves within the space in machine learning, in genotype, phenotype prediction. Did I get that right?
That's right.
Yes. Okay, great. So we're very thrilled to have you here. Can you tell our audience a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a computer scientist, but my main research is bioinformatics. So I often look at very large amounts of biological data, predominantly genetic data. And we use that to try to predict diseases or the underlying causes of the diseases. Often there's a genetic component to it and an environmental component. And so nowadays there's a bit of a change. Obviously, machine learning is very successful, and we also use machine learning techniques to replace or to accomplish or further develop the statistical foundation of this kind of task.
People who don't know, I mean, we have, regular people like me. What is genotype, phenotype prediction?
So phenotype basically can mean many things. Often we look at disease-related phenotypes or diseases in general, but this could also be any kind of, could be hair color or eye color, body height, and so on. And we want to predict, or we want to formulate this prediction as a machine learning task by looking at the potential explanatory variables that come from our genome. And this is also a very exciting time to address this, because now is the time where genome sequencing has become democratized and becomes very affordable. It can be done in large scales, which is what you need if you want to especially look at rare diseases where you don't find rare mutations in many people, so you need a lot of people for that. So it's also a bit of a data science, a genomic data science problem.
Are there specific diseases that can or cannot be detected by machine learning if this was something that was, let's say, fully possible?
That's a very loaded question. So the classic way of dealing with it is through normal statistics. So it's called a genome-wide association study, where you collect a lot of samples who have a certain disease, and then you also need a control. And then what is commonly done is you look at each potential mutation that could explain the disease individually. Right. And then you develop a p-value, how well does it explain? And then often it was noticed that individual mutations don't have so much explanatory power. And this is where machine learning can help, hopefully. We believe that if you look at many mutations in combination, using very powerful machine learning models like neural networks, then you have a better chance to explain with a higher accuracy disease.
Considering the case of dimensionality in genome-wide association studies, what are some of the most promising computational strategies being developed to manage and interpret the vast amount of data that is generated?
So let me first address the problem of the curse of dimensionality. So in machine learning, it is often not a good idea to overwhelm a model with a plethora of features. So usually you want to reduce it as much as necessary because you often, if you have too many features, it basically means your model has too many parameters that you can fine tune. And in order to do that, you would need a very large amount of data. This is still not affordable.
Right.
So, for example, with in the case of natural language processing, where we have half the internet where ChatGPT can be trained on, there is a lot of data available. But
Yeah.
for diseases, this is far more expensive. So in order to set up a genome-wide association study, we need a lot of people and following up is much more expensive. So we don't have this kind of luxury to have huge data sets. Still, they're getting very large. For example, as you can see with the Emirati Genome Project that is underway, we are actually building up large data sets. There's also the UK Biobank, a data set that I work with intensively. But in principle, we want to address the curse of dimensionality by reducing the amount of features that we are feeding into our machine learning model. And to do that, we are standing on the shoulders of giants. We are making use of what our statisticians colleagues have been developing for the last decades. We make use of the best practices in that field by looking at basically in terms of genetics, we look at the most promising or the most likely mutations, or we call them SNPs, that can, SNP stands for single nucleotide polymorphism. It's basically a mutation that might explain the disease. So we basically pick those that are likely to be, likely to have explanatory power. And we only focus our machine learning part on those. So we have, like we can introduce a threshold. There are a couple of criteria you can introduce to pick those SNPs.
Right.
And that's one thing. So that's basically the pure genotype-phenotype prediction. And then we also have the possibility to extend that problem by accompanying the genetic features with additional features that can come from your environment. This could be clinical data.
So nature versus nature.
Yes, exactly. Because we want to also exactly account for the part that diseases often are a mix of nurture and nature. Right? There's a genetic component and an environmental component. So accordingly, our machine learning model would be relatively poor if it would only focus on one part, especially if it's not a purely genetic disease. So that's why we like databases like the UK Biobank that has both. It has the genetic component and also the environmental component. This can be very interesting, the way they ask questions when you sign up for something like the UK Biobank as a participant. They will ask you questions like, how many sunburns did you have in your childhood? Which
I don't think anyone really knows how many sunburns they have in
yeah,
their
That's
But then what if someone puts in wrong or false information into that? What would be the outcome of that? I mean,
as our daily bread and butter as machine learning people, we often have to deal with noise in the data. And we hope that as we have large numbers, the noise will not play a big role.
So is this biobank similar to the one that the UAE is doing here now?
That is my understanding, yes. So at least the hard part, which is organizing all the sequencing that is done, what also needs to be done is to link this to all the clinical data and all the other environmental information that could be potentially relevant.
So when you're saying linking it to clinical data, that means that they have to access patient records?
Yes.
Is there an ethical downside to this?
Well, that's obviously this puts very high requirements on data security.
Right.
So there has been lots of discussions and countries have different legal regulations on how to deal with that. So, for example, in the US, you have companies like 23andMe who are direct-to-consumer genetics providers.
Right.
And in Germany, this would not be allowed, for example. There has to be a doctor in between who breaks down this kind of information to...
So then, let's say patients then would have to give consent right away.
Consent is one thing.
Or their doctors or something in
Yes,
order
yes,
to go
and
into
that's
the
a
database.
very difficult topic. I remember in the very early beginnings of these kind of experiments, George Church, one of the true groundbreakers in the field, he collected as samples only people who had a degree in genetics, so that they would understand the consent of what they are
right.
signing up to. Because if you, for example, get your genome sequenced and it's in a database that, for example, is public, then you would not know now all the information that is in there. There could be very private information that you might not want to disclose, and we don't know yet which genes are responsible for certain traits.
Genomics has been criticized for its lack of diversity in study populations. What steps are being taken to include underrepresented populations in genomic research? And how does this shift impact the accuracy of disease prediction across different ethnicities?
So the problem of genomics failing diversity, as was famously titled on Nature some 10 years ago, is still a big problem because, as I said, although sequencing is being democratized in the sense that a genome now costs just a few $100. It used to be a million or millions in the very beginning. It's still not affordable in large scale because it also requires a lot of technology to be transferred. So it's not affordable in many developing countries. I believe that the UAE is actually doing a good effort in that sense, having strong connections to Africa, offering a lot of sequencing support to countries in Africa. However, what I'm particularly interested in is how can we deal with the situation that we have only few genomes, for example, from a population where you can just, 50 or 100, that would not by itself lend themselves to build up a powerful machine learning model.
Right.
But we might not need to start from scratch if we want to do cancer research or diabetes or coronary artery disease, because it's not fundamentally different in other countries. There might be population-specific differences, but they are not a completely different. There's not a completely different genetic component to each individual disease. So what we are looking at is a concept called transfer learning, where we start with a data set that is composed of, as a large data set for a well-studied population. And then we fine-tune this for a data set that is small, which would not lend itself to a full-blown machine learning model.
Right. Okay, I have a strange question. Maybe I'm completely off. But we can use machine learning to predict potential diseases, right? So let's say if I might have a mutation for a specific disease, can you do that to predict what your future children would have? Is that something that's within this or no?
That's not a very strange question. That's a very good question, and of course, it's a hot topic. So there's a good distinction to make from a genetics perspective. So there are somatic mutations that basically are acquired during your lifetime. So many cancer-related mutations are actually somatic. They are not germline mutations. So that's something that would most likely not propagate to the offspring.
Right.
But many germline. So yes, there are definitely concerns, and as you probably know, that talking about breast cancer. Some breast cancer types have a very high heritability. So yes, this is definitely a concern. So if someone was diagnosed with cancer and because of and there's a mutation that is very strongly linked, then yes, the children should. There is a lot of topic about looking at the children, it's a bit of a burden of information.
Yeah.
Do you want to know that, or
Right.
do you? So, and here it's actually a good point you're touching on. I think it's very interesting to look at actionable diseases. Actionable as in which diseases can I do something about, right?
So would you say it's more like when you say something about like maybe changing your environment?
Yeah, so or changing your lifestyle, and so some diseases where we don't have a cure, like Huntington or Parkinson, maybe it's best not to know. So and maybe you wouldn't also bother your
Ignorance
children.
is bliss?
Ignorance
Really?
is bliss. Yes, yes. Well, that's a personal decision,
Right.
especially if there are diseases that you can't do anything about. If there are, if the disease is considered actionable or to some extent manageable,
Right.
then I believe genetic counseling has a big role to play, and here machine learning can help a lot.
Okay, great. Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for being on our show, and maybe
My
we will
pleasure.
have another talk, maybe one that's a bit more technical when I get some more information. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and of course, thank you to Dr. Andreas for being here. We really learned a lot. Hope you learned a lot. And if you are new, just make sure that you hit the thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notifications bell so that you don't miss out on future episodes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.